Welcome to the Sharon Fitzmaurice podcast, celebrating the resilience of the human spirit. And we're proud to be partnered with intothewestadventures.com. Please check out their guided and self-guided tours, and they have some wonderful Ireland island walking tours, Inishbofin, Inishturk, Achill Islands, Inishark, and many more. Check them out today. You can go guided or self-guided along on their Camino and Irish walking tours. And now to our next guest. So my guest today is Clodagh McCumsky, and she's from Wexford in Ireland, an award-winning and accredited master practitioner in well-being. And she has coaching experience as well for 12 years working with individuals and organizations on a wide range of well-being and culture-related themes. Well, I can tell you that I am delighted to have this conversation with Clodagh today. I connected with her through LinkedIn. And we're also planning an event in April, which we're going to talk about during the podcast. So, Claudia, you are very welcome.
I'm so happy to be here, Sharon. And from the moment we met, I think we connected. So I'm delighted to be here to meet your audience.
Lovely. And we did. And it's amazing, that I often say this, that we may have many connections through social media. But real connections are about building the relationships. And I think we did that immediately when we connected. We set up a chat to see, how our work we could support each other, what you were doing, what I was doing. And we had a great chat, Clodagh, and it was like we had known each other for ages.
That's right. And then I went to see you at that wonderful event in Dublin, organized by James, and
Yeah.
it was amazing. And you spoke so beautifully, and the other speakers were amazing. So I think we were both immediately energized by what the other was doing, or certainly I was. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, definitely, yes. Because I remember getting off the Zoom and John came home that evening and I was saying, I've just spoke to this amazing lady in Wexford and, and I'm telling him everything. And he's like, you just met people, Sharon, and you're just like, you know everything about them. And I said, that's what, I love is I love people's stories. I love where they came from, where they are now. And again, that's what this podcast is all about because as we know, people that are working, having family life, doing what they can. And sometimes they feel a little bit frustrated with life and maybe they're not as far as they want to be. And it's realizing, I suppose, with our work is how we can support them, in moving forward with whatever they need. But let's get back to you first now, because you're the star of the show today, Clodagh. So you grew up in Wexford and you went to college in Dublin, is that right?
No, I
No.
grew up in Dublin actually. Yeah, I
Oh,
was
that's right. I knew I got it wrong somewhere.
So I'm the youngest of four, and mum was from Galway. So mum was from Sligo, and dad was from Galway, from your
Yeah.
part of the world. And so they moved around a bit, and they ended up in Dublin. And so my other family members were born in like Sligo, Cavan, and places, and I was the one born in Dublin. And I lived there for most of my life. But I started traveling at an early age. My dad was an engineer, so he would have done some work in the Middle East when I was a child. So that kind of planted this seed and desire to see a bit of the world in me. And that's why I ended up then later working overseas when I grew up. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I suppose it's an amazing experience, isn't it, as well as a child, when you know no different and you are traveling a lot with family, that it becomes part of your life. But what was hard about it for you, Clodagh? Because I know there's a lot of people that have said to me, they never felt like they had a secure home or a base, they were moving around a lot, and other people loved it. How did you feel about it?
I absolutely loved it, but the downside was the lack of grounding that it brings to you. Yeah. So it took me, I often joke that it took me, 3 years of meditation to understand what the word grounding meant. But I think maybe in some ways it might have even been more years of meditation than that because we moved. Now I had a stable home life in
Mm.
Dublin, but it was more the later work that I did. When I was in my, mid-20s or whatever, I went overseas again. And what that did was it enriched me enormously in terms of the culture, the people I met, just seeing different parts of the
Mm,
world. Feel very privileged to have this incredible library of experiences of working in different places, meeting different types of people from all backgrounds,
mm,
community organizations, donors, all types of people. But um, I think when you get to a certain age in life, particularly, you want to be somewhere. You want to develop deeper roots, yeah, in
mm,
a place. And the minus of moving around is that you don't develop the deep roots. Every time you move, you have to find everything. You have to find, where do I buy the food that I like? Where do I buy everything? And everything is new, so
yeah.
even big things, small things, and then obviously your friends and all of that, that's a whole, people, like the people are the most important part of all of our lives.
Mm,
And, these days the world is a lot more connected, and I can connect with people anywhere in the world like you can, like you do
mm,
through this podcast. But just this, we didn't always have Zoom either, right? But also like that in-person connection with people that you know and that you care about. I suppose I think that is the challenge, and so somehow or other, we all need to make sure that we're getting that.
absolutely. I can resonate with the lack of grounding because we also moved quite a lot. I think we were sharing that. We had that kind of in common that we moved. I didn't move different countries, it was different counties in Ireland. But I do remember having to make new friends, being the new person again in a school, all of those things. It was quite hard, to fit in, I felt. So I'm not sure if you felt like that. There was parts of my life that I felt like I didn't fit in anywhere in particular.
That was a huge, yeah, that would have been a lack of belonging, not
Yeah.
fitting in, all of that. That was a theme that I had to work with and work through. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I,
What
I think
drew you to the aid work then? What was it, when you said, I'm going to travel again into the aid work? What was that one thing that you said, this is what I'm going to do now, or I'm going to try or experience?
so. I studied economics in UCD, and there was a course at the time in development studies, and so that was what I was drawn to do, and it was a natural progression of that type of a course to do studies in international development.
Mm,
And so, the lecturers, the students, mm, it was a small group. Everybody was from that type of background or interest. So you would have had some people that are already working in the field, in different types of
mm,
international organizations. And then you'd have had some people like me who were younger and interested to do it. So the seed was planted early on. Um,
mm,
seed was planted, I suppose, in childhood from having
mm,
gone to places, that curiosity. And then there was, the education system at the time also supported it. Yeah.
mm. So, what was your first experience then? Tell us about that as a 20-something-year-old. And even though you've had experience in your childhood of traveling, but now you're your own person responsible for yourself. What was that like going out, your first experience? And where did you go to, Clodagh?
So my first experience, I went to Angola, and you're talking kind of 1995, so I'm in my kind of mid 20s or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it was a very different world at the time. They had the second longest running civil war in Africa. Um, and there was, it was an intractable war. The Cold War had been fought by proxy there for many years.
Mm,
And the country was blessed with incredible natural resources, beautiful people, but incredible natural resources in the form of diamonds and oil, right? So
mm,
obviously, um, that brought its challenges because everybody's yeah, trying to get their piece of that. And so you had different international interests in the place. I won't go into the details there, but then there was also there was consequences for for the local people. Yeah.
Mm,
Um, and it was a very kind of a bloody civil war in that it it was it affected, it broke down families. It wasn't just
mm,
this part of the country against that part of the country. Families were divided, and so it was a complex emergency type of a situation. So went in, and at the time, I remember the day I arrived, there was hyperinflation in the country at the time. So we had whatever, $20 a day or whatever for your per diem or something like that.
mm,
I remember getting my per diem, and it was like a small rucksack full of money because of the hyperinflation. So if you
mm,
were um so it was just just jumping into a very, very different world. And obviously, just trying to understand that, learn about that. Um
mm,
Recently, actually, last November, a friend of mine that I'd worked with in Angola, and I'd worked with her also in East Timor and Ethiopia. She came to visit Ireland. So, we hadn't seen each other in 20 years, and we were just kind of remembering and reliving all these memories. So
mm,
it's kind of nice to remember it again. Um, but I suppose when I was living there, I worked in a remote, I did kind of three main jobs when I was living there. The first job was I worked in a remote area in a place called Balumbo in Benguela province in Angola. And there was a house of four or five of us that were there, and we were helping
mm,
out. And there was a hospital project that we supported, serving, I can't remember, but serving the whole
mm,
wider community. And there were some American nuns there also that were helping out with the hospital project. And then we did a massive food distribution. So we were organizing food distribution. That was my main job. So I was managing a warehouse. So we would get these huge consignments of trucks and thousands of tons of food. Um, and then we would do a distribution once a month for the host, the local population. And then we used to travel to what they would call rebel held territories to do food distributions to those areas. And we would also do distributions of non-food items. So it was just a very, very, you're very different world, like an
mm,
incredibly different world. Like if you compare, say, what was happening in Ireland, 95, yeah, the Celtic Tiger wasn't there, but the economy was starting
mm,
to pick up. Yeah, the early markers of that were happening, right?
mm,
And then I was just living in this place that um, was life was very intense and interesting, and you could feel that you were making a difference, and there was a reason to get out of bed in the morning.
mm,
There was all of that, right? Obviously, there also, before I went, I had to learn a bit of the main language was there. Was Portuguese. It had been a Portuguese colony, but then they would have also had a lot of local African languages.
mm,
So in a lot of cases, it was single translation, Portuguese to whatever the local language was, and in some cases, it was even double translation. Yeah, so
mm,
just just moving to a very different world, a very different environment. But because of my childhood and having moved around, I adapted quite well.
mm.
I'm somebody that if you put me somewhere, I can adapt well in the circumstance, but there are consequences, medium and longer term, like what we've just discussed there. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you have to take care of yourself
Mm.
in those environments.
Yeah. And again, when we're in our 20s, we don't always think of self-care because there's, as you said, a reason to get out of the bed. There are so many things happening, and I suppose a bit volatile as well. Were you frightened, Clodagh, while you were there?
Very rarely. No, no, no. Like there would have been some UN observers in the town from different nationalities, and that was also interesting.
Mm,
You'd meet different people from different countries. I was friendly with one or two, different yeah, international observers from different countries. From I remember a very nice Indian man, a Jordanian, just Norwegian, different nationalities. So we always, you in such environments also you have huge security protocols, yeah, that you follow. So like we had radio checks every morning, every night. If we were going out in the car or anywhere, we would have our handheld radios with us, and you're using all of that, Charlie, Romeo, all that
Yeah,
alpha
yeah.
in everything that you do. So, and I was happy to follow those rules, and largely. Later on, I would have heard of people that had been, tragically killed in such environments. But within our organization, our circle at the time,
Mm,
certainly, if the rules were really clear, we were really, really strong on that, and you stayed within them, and you were okay. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. What did you learn about yourself from that first experience, Clodagh?
Um, uh, I'll have to think about that.
Mm,
I suppose I definitely liked it. Yeah. I didn't maybe fully break down the different experiences because for me it was a continuum of 14 years. Um, but say the people there, right? They're in this situation where second longest running civil war in Africa, a lot of life stresses, a lot of instability and whatever. And definitely what I would have learned about the people is their ability to enjoy the moment,
mm,
even in these really unstable situations. Like I've never met like Angolans, they know how to have joy, they know how to organize a party and organize an event, even in the midst of chaos, right?
mm,
And you would see that. So maybe um would I have learned that I would just learn that, everywhere is different, people are different. I learned that there's different types of wealth, there's different types of poverty, but not necessarily Angola specific.
mm,
I think that in Angola there was so many different influences, yeah, and at a big global stage at the time, I think they were even exporting something like the they were providing 7% of US's oil, and they were expecting that to go up to 15% within 5 or 10 years. Yeah.
mm,
So I would just say I learned a lot about the importance of people working together, right, to
mm.
solve a problem. Yeah, I
Yeah.
would say that I learned that there was so many multiple stakeholders. You had lots of local organizations, you had government organizations, you had non-governmental organizations, you have communities, and you have lots of international groups, and just the importance in extreme tough situations, how you have to sit at the table together
Mm,
to solve problems. Now, people don't always do that, okay? But the importance of and addressing everything to solve a problem. Yeah,
mm,
sometimes we can pick, and you can't do everything, right, at the same time, but everything has a role in an interconnected system.
mm.
Yeah. And
Wow.
and we need inputs from so many people um to solve problems.
Yeah. It
We all
kind
need
of
together.
it gives you a feel of the world today and how so many people need to sit around a table and listen to everybody's views, not just a certain few people having their views being heard and other people not being listened to. For me, when you're speaking, and I hear that about the people, and again, I'm the very same. For me, it's always the experience of meeting the people, their lives, their culture, what I learn from that experience, what you're taking away with you, isn't it? But also, I suppose not always what's wrong with the world, but looking at what's right with it as well and how we can improve it, in our human experience in this world. When you finish that Angola trip, and you were going to your next post, we'll say it, were you taking away experience and being more aware of who you are? And as you said, certain roles, and there's so many stakeholders involved in everything that you have to be very diplomatic, I suppose. But were you able to stand up for yourself and for the people around you? Did you find a voice in being able to say, this is what we want and this is how it's going to work?
We at the time I had a good, very helpful supervisor. Yeah, and I suppose that helped. That provided a structure and a space, and that person would have been more experienced. So there were definitely some examples of good leadership around me, and there were also other examples. Okay,
Yeah.
right. Which I won't go into too much detail on, but there was plenty of other examples as well, shall I say, right? And so I suppose, yeah, that was another big part of it. I was thinking kind of big picture, but a big part of it was me trying to find my own leadership style. I like this was my first job apart from, having worked in, selling in a shop or
Mm,
I'd worked in a hospital or but I
mm,
hadn't managed people per se, right? And then suddenly here I was having to manage, yeah. And when you're trying to manage a warehouse using double translation and you've got, thousands of tons of food, you have to
mm,
find a way of communicating, right? And you're organizing a food distribution for 20,000 families. We would
mm,
distribute every day over a week. It was, I can't remember the numbers, but it was, 20 to 40,000 families. And so you have
mm,
5,000 families coming today to get their food, or 4,000. And you have to verify, there's a lot of detail, right? So I suppose I would have learned, okay, what details matter and what doesn't matter. Because there's
mm,
aid work, there's huge compliance, there's audits, there's all those types of things. And so you have to track it, um and then also you're working in a security environment, so you an insecure environment, so again you have to adhere to that, yeah.
mm,
And so I would have learned what really matters in a situation. I had to learn a lot about my own leadership style. I would have had my own insecurities. Took me a while to work through them. Yeah, so didn't always certain things, if I was to handle them now, I'd handle them differently than what I might have. But sometimes we learn about by doing the right thing, and sometimes we learn by doing it the other way, right? And
yeah.
definitely there would have been lessons in both ways. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how we learn, isn't it, Claude, as well, from all of those experiences. What was, you went on then, and I know you've traveled so many countries, but what was we'll ask you your best and your worst experience of your time doing the aid work?
I can't say I mean, I think it was all good experiences. Yeah, there was no worst. They all, like, I spent 4 years in Angola. I spent a year in East Timor. That was, you know, an extraordinary experience. I was there around 99, 2000, and so much happening the first time the UN was running a country. It had been a small, closed country, and suddenly the international community descended on the place. So it must have been a confusing time for local people, a lot of change. Um, working with different organizations, working with bureaucracy, trying to get a country, a government set up. It, it always amazed me though. You'd meet amazing people, right? But then when you're just trying to build something from scratch with lots of different personalities and people around the table, um, new challenges come. and there's deadlines, and sometimes you have to rush things, so things don't always get done as properly as they need to, and so yeah, that was also a learning experience vis-a-vis governance and the challenges of that. Um, uh, Again, amazing people, and hearing the stories, like a lot of the people, and some of them would still be in government there, like they would have been bushfighters for years, and then
Mm,
suddenly they're running a country. The challenges of that have to be huge, yeah, and even just all the trauma that they might have experienced over
mm,
the years, and here they are, and they're having to, be out there and to be uh, the hope for the nation.
mm,
Yeah, like I suppose you learn about the complexities of life. Yeah,
mm,
that people can have a lot going on in their private lives, and they still have these huge responsibilities as well, and the way they can carry them with grace,
mm,
and all of that. And then uh, go to Ethiopia. I was in India for 4 years. I was in Swaziland for 4 months. Angola, Ethiopia, India, East Timor, and Swaziland. Angola, Ethiopia. I was in Ethiopia. Ethiopia was a very different experience in that all of the other countries that I worked in, it was mainly kind of emergency stuff. And
mm,
Ethiopia, when I was there, there was crisis areas in terms of food security and whatever, but there wasn't, the country was stable. Yeah, it
mm,
was a very different experience. Ethiopia was hugely enriching, like it has this very ancient civilization. Yeah. Um, they have these churches, rock-hewn churches that were carved out thousands of years ago. And certainly when I was there, now you're talking, 20 years ago or whatever, you could um, y- you could go to these places, and apart from Coca-Cola cans or whatever, it felt like you could have been there 2000 years ago. Not the whole picture, but certain moments of your day
mm,
when you're visiting these places. You're going back in time to see what life might have been like hundreds, thousands of years ago.
mm,
And there was something just enormously enriching there.
mm,
Also, I found the whole experience also, sometimes say we read the news here and we have an understanding of what goes
mm,
on in Europe or the States. But when you go to these countries, it widens your understanding. And what we might presume to be the way it is here, other people will see it differently. Yeah, and quite differently. So you asked me a question, and I went all over the place there, Sharon. I think you asked me which was the best experience. I would say that they were all
mm,
enormously fascinating from an internal viewpoint, but also from a um, just a life understanding, a
mm,
world understanding viewpoint, and just the challenges that people face.
mm,
And, say some of the stuff, it certainly would have helped put some of the problems that I would worry about or my own little problems in context. Yeah.
mm,
Swaziland, when I lived there 4 months, and I lived there it was 2007. I lived there in 2008, rather, for 4 months. And in 1997, life expectancy there, I think, was around 60. And in 2007, it was 45 because of HIV and AIDS. And I remember once I visited a homestead there, and there was a woman, and she maybe in her 70s or 80s, and she was with two small great great grandchildren, small family members, maybe there were two or three.
mm,
All of the other generations in her family were either sick or they were passed on. And there is this woman trying to look after and provide for. And, she was crouched down and,
mm,
wouldn't have been in the full of her own physical health. And she had this um, huge responsibility and must have had some huge sadness in her heart for that. Um, and that even within that, um, I remember you'd see some people and they are just so committed, yeah, to you see the survival instinct at play in people, right? And you see some people just thrive in these horrendously adverse circumstances. Across India, I would have seen so many just trailblazers, people who are championing causes and living in challenging circumstances, but somehow or other carrying the torch, fighting the good fight. Yeah. So there was a lot of you'd be inspired every day by people. You'll see hopeless situations, but you'll also be inspired every day. And so hopelessness doesn't even though there's challenges, yeah, it doesn't really take over because you see so many people really fighting the good fight all over the world for, in big ways, in small ways, in whatever way they can. And you see the human spirit triumph in lots of circumstances.
Amazing. Just hearing you speak about it because you have the lived experience of it is wonderful. It's hearing that inspiration, that resilience and hope, even with that grandmother, the hope she had and survival, that she had to fight for her grandchildren, no, even though she carried so much sadness and loss. It's something I think humanity does really well, that in the worst situations, we find something within ourselves, don't we, Claude? And people often say to me, but how? How do we do that? And I said, because we want to survive. I think it's going back, isn't it, to our ancestors? We all want to survive. So I'm sure in those countries against so much adversity and having to fight for your family, for your survival, for your food, for your freedom, just having support like the aid workers, like, all the organizations that came in to help them, like you, Claude, you don't realize the importance that you had on those villages and people and country as well.
Yeah, yeah. I that's maybe for them to share,
Mm.
right? But I totally agree with you that when you see the worst in life, you see the best in people, and
Yeah.
I've seen that actually. That is one of my overriding learnings of the whole experience. Now,
Mm.
sometimes when you see the best in life, comfort can make us, cowards, and comfort can make
Mm.
us too much comfort is not a good thing for humanity either. But when you do see, people rise to the occasion,
Yeah.
and most people, so many people rise to the occasion. Like there is you see that survival piece alive. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's wonderful. Yes, I've great respect for you because, it's not everybody's cup of tea. We'll say it that not everybody would be able to go out there and experience that and, learn even from the mistakes and find your own leadership skills as well and move on to the next maybe horrendous place, with horrendous circumstances, but that you could see the hope in people's eyes and, that survival and wanting to continue living their life, but they needed support. So yeah, I admire you, Claude. I think it's an amazing experience to have in life. And again, I love hearing from your experience of it because I know you now. So from all of that, and you returned home to Ireland with all of these new skills and learnings. Did you, and I know you said you found it hard to ground yourself, what was that like, that experience coming back home and
So
deciding I'm staying here for a little while?
I suppose when I initially came back, I was planning to come back for 6 months. I think in most of the countries that I went to, I was like, I'll go for 6 months and we'll see what happens. And here I am, 16 years later, 16 plus years later, and I'm still here, right? Uh, Aid workers, we often talk about a concept of reverse culture shock.
Mm.
So, you come home. And I would have been home. The longest I stayed away in the 14 years, I think I stayed 16 or 18 months away. But other than that, I was at home at least, I was back at least once a year. And it was still in before people were very connected on phones and the internet. It was still in those days. But, I came back, I would have met people, certainly spent good time with the family. Wouldn't have always been able to catch up with friends because, often you come home and you're just you've 2 weeks off and you're burnt out. Yeah.
Mm,
So it might just take you have these plans, but yeah, you're exhausted, right? So I would say that although I had experiences, I hadn't fully processed those experiences. I hadn't fully processed, there was a lot I hadn't processed. Yeah. So, um, reverse culture shock. So, you come back, and I came back around 2008. So at the time, that was just when the crash was happening. So when I had been coming home before that, I would meeting friends and people were talking about the second or the third house or
mm,
there was a lot of very you know, big plans and quite wealth and growth focused, financial growth focused plans. So when I came back in 2008, it was a different dynamic. Yeah, it
mm,
was a much more kind of maybe scared and whatever, but it was a much more maybe grounded from a financial
mm,
realistic. Yeah, there was a bit more realism in the mindset, even though I know it was a huge time of struggle for a lot of people as well. So it was a hopeless time for a lot of people that but say when I came home, I wouldn't have known that many entrepreneurs. I knew the people that I I knew from college and from childhood, and that was
mm,
my reference point, and obviously my family. So I came back. So just to like the last country I'd lived in India. I was living in a city with for 4 years with 20 million people, and then I come back and I'm living in Wexford with 20,000 people. There was no parity, right? It's just like, where am I? So it felt small. Yeah, it
mm,
felt very different. Yeah. Um, and I suppose it took me a few years, I would say, to just I'd grown up in Dublin, but what had happened is that my parents had moved to Wexford in 95 around the time that I went away. So this was the natural place to kind of come back to. And so, yeah, it took many years to just find my footing on all sorts of levels. So there was the internal Clodagh piece, and then there was just what's going on, where which planet am I on now, where am I, yeah, and what's this world about, yeah,
yeah.
and because in I suppose in many of the other countries you're dealing at quite a you're dealing at a practical level, but you're also operating with actors that have to deal at more a strategic level as well. You're aware of if you're in Angola, there's the peace process, right? You're in India, you're working with the different government departments to try and everybody pool the resources for maximum impact, and all of that. So I kind of came back here. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and all of that. So shortly after I came back, I started meditating, and I would say that's probably the biggest and the best gift I've ever given to myself. So I started initially with a woman doing kind of journeying and mindfulness practices, and I also did a stint listening to hollow sync. You listen to these kind of recordings, and they bring your your brain waves to different levels. I would have done some breath work. I do mantra. I but what I would say is that is what enabled me to kind of land ground and just
Mm,
accept, yeah, and make peace with all of the stuff that I'd seen or had happened or
mm,
witnessed, and I'm not sure if Yeah, it took a while, right? But it happened. Like I know when I came back first, I wouldn't have potentially felt that happiness or peace was possible. I wouldn't have felt that. Yeah. And now I believe it's possible if to work at it, right? It's not a magic marker. Yeah, you have to work through things. Yeah, and as you know very well, and you have to make peace with yourself. You have to make peace with things. But it's a phenomenal companion. It's a phenomenal resource. It's a phenomenal tool, and it helps you connect with yourself. It helps you develop a neutral perspective and all of those things. And obviously, look, there was amazing people as well that some of the old friends, but also I think when anybody comes back and from anywhere, your mind changes. So some of the old friends that you had, you mightn't have so much in common with, right? And then sometimes also I've also had the experience that you think you don't have that much in common with them. And then 3 years later you spend time and you realize you have everything in common with them. So sometimes it's just where you are in the journey. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just where you are in the journey. But generally when I came back, and I don't think this doesn't isn't just aid work, this is people having different life experiences, to kind of go back to, the chat about, what's going on, in the local, whatever your interest is, whether it's GAA or whatever the interest is. Um, uh, Certainly my head would have been up here. It was busy, it was like I remember story I often tell is like, at one point I was living in Angola, and um there was it was the second longest running civil war in Africa, and it was a survival issue. There was landmines. Like when we used to, um, I lived in a place called Chikuma for 6 months, and there was the only way in and out of the place was on a small Cessna plane. They were driven by amazing WFP World Food Program pilots. But, they had to be really good at their job, because if they landed, 5 meters either side of the runway, it was mined, right? So, you're dealing with these kind of worries and concerns, and that was also a barter economy. Like we used to buy our vegetables from the local community by giving them soap and salt. Yeah. So you go
Wow.
from that, and then I remember once even just going to a supermarket during one of my trips home, and I wanted to get some ice cream, and I went in to the shop to buy ice cream, and I had to leave because there was just too much choice. Yeah. So, there's all those things, and there's how do you come your nervous system is up here,
Mm.
right? So how do you come down to these more kind of mundane conversations? And, part of it is um you're like, well, look, they're worried about, matching the color of curtains, and they're getting stressed, and I'm dealing with this, which is really important. And you have to you have to find your parity. You have to come down, right? And
Yeah.
stress is stress. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely there are first world problems and there are other problems.
Yeah.
But when people are stressed, it's a problem, overstressed in an unhealthy, chronic, traumatic way.
Mm.
Uh, so yeah, I'm sure you've been on that journey as well, Sharon. You have to come down, and
Mm.
you have to you learn to relate again. You learn to
Yeah.
appreciate. Um, and part of that journey is judging. Like, well, like that's nothing, in your head, but
Mm.
but it's something to them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I've often said that, we're quick to judge, and people say, well, my problem is not that big because their problem is really big. And I said, well, if it's your problem and it's causing you stress and worry and anxiety, I said, then it is a problem for you, whether you consider it big or small. And like, the other thing I find fascinating as well, is like how you came back down after all of the world events and lived experience, the trauma and, the UN, and then somebody's over there giving out about the tire on the car or the dirt of, then they got a scratch, and you're like is that really a problem? But of course it is to that person because they have not had the experience that you've had. So the same would I would feel in life is, no matter what anybody has been through, what their life experience, that's the way they look at it through their eyes. And again, I always say we meet people where they are, even if we go, Jesus, that's nothing. That is absolutely nothing in a person's life. I've been in Angola. Do you see what they've had to go through? But they don't know and they don't understand. But what someone may understand is when we speak about how an experience made us feel. They mightn't relate to the experience in a different country or a different, trauma that somebody went in their life, but they can listen and maybe meet the person is with how you felt or how you're feeling because of that experience. And it would probably be the same words that they have in an experience that maybe you can't relate to, or you might consider what some people consider very small, but we can all relate to each other. And that's where even in your experiences, you could relate to the human level, the aspects of people having to survive, whether it is someone of the region or it is somebody that is a colleague of yours, even the people, the bush people that want to go in and set up a new government and they've never been in politics or government and they now have to come in and create this new aspect of themselves that if we're not learning from the people around us, I don't think we'll ever learn about ourselves, Clodagh.
Yeah, none of us, there's a mentor that I know in Wexford, and he has a great line. He says, none of us are the full shilling, and
No,
none of us are,
I love it.
none of us are a man called Blaise Brosnan, right? But he delivers it well too. But none of us are the full shilling. We all, uh, and the world is changing so quickly. Like the rate of change in the world is increasing by 4x every 20 years. So if you do all the multiples out, it's 20,000 years worth of change this century compared to previous centuries. So it's no wonder that people are full. And actually, that's one of the things that the stresses that I would have seen in Africa and Asia and whatever, the challenges you can see there's a lot of parity with what's going on around the world at the moment in terms of just people being full. I understand it's more chronic stress. It's not so much these
Mm,
uh, life-threatening acute stresses, but experientially in their bodies, they're experiencing them as the nervous system up here.
mm,
But there's a solution to that too. Different solutions for different people, but there is a solution, and that's the thing.
yeah. Well, I know why I connected with you even more now because we have nearly spoken for an hour and it has felt like we have just briefly sat on the chairs to have this chat. And that's when I love conversations the most, is where you're not watching the clock, but again, because of recording and your time, I'm like, okay, I better keep an eye on it. But because of all of your work, and I suppose the connections we've had and the conversations we've had, we're very much aligned in our values and what we would like to help and support people with now, through our different experiences. And I was never an aid worker and I never traveled the world like Calodagh, but I have my own lived experience through trauma and stress and all of those things that many of us have gone through in life. So we got together, our two beautiful minds and hearts, and we decided that we would create the Wellness Blueprint. So this is an event we're running on the 12th of April online through Zoom, and it's creating a personalized plan to support your life and goals. And it's coming from both of our experiences and what we do now to support our clients. So you'll be doing a 4 rooms well-being assessment. So seeing physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually where you need support. And Clodagh will be working with you also on the 12 pillars of well-being and identifying where we need to focus. We'll have personalized plan, you'll have actionable tools for mindfulness, vitality, and growth, but all of it is bringing clarity and balance and motivation. Because I think no matter where we are, and just as you said it, Clodagh, after having so much experience and going from that acute, I suppose, you were nearly like you were always on, having to come down into yourself, into your body, and that many people don't have to do that because they're living it, as you said, in their daily lives now with stresses of work, family, finances, where they are in their lives, relationships, careers, everything. And that it's very hard to come back down into your body to feel safe and to look at your life differently. And there's where the clarity comes because we can get very caught up in our minds and we can't see that clear path or vision for ourselves. So we've created this wonderful event to help you and to help you create a plan going forward. And I can tell you what, I'm very excited about it, Clodagh.
I'm really excited about it too. And I think one of the reasons that I'm super excited, I'm excited to work with you, but previously, there's a massive well-being buffet out there for people to choose from, and sometimes it can feel overwhelming,
Mm,
where to go, what to do, right? Um, and what we're doing is we're providing an overview, right? But also, like, say, I don't know, on part of my journey would have been, it was like I would solve one problem, but I was creating another by solving this one. So I was kind of filling one, I was digging another hole by to fill a hole. Yeah. And so I think when we think of well-being, we have to look at the bigger picture and we have to kind of get a grip on the key four areas.
yeah.
Yeah. You
Mm,
have to find, the balance in those areas. And I think that the combined skill set, right, that we both bring, and the life experience can help people really identify, the two or three areas that they need to really work on. Where are they generating maximum unhealthy stress? Yeah, where do they need to go first? Yeah. So um uh because there's so many different messages out there. And the idea of the program is that it'll give you an overview, but it'll also give you some specific places to look and to address. And we, through the sessions, will be giving you some practical tools to address them in practicality
mm,
straight away. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and it is about the tools, isn't it? Because I know for myself as well, and we've had those conversations like you, the meditation, mindfulness, all of the things that supported me in where I was at the time and where I needed to go. And it gave me that kind of foundation and support to help me. So that's what we would like to help other people with as well. And as you can see from the two of us, we're very normal. And we love laughing and, sharing stories. So, come into our little world on the 12th of April. It's 3 hours online. You can join from anywhere. You can sit in your pajamas with your cup of coffee in the morning if you wish and just come along and see what you can get from it for yourself because it's all about what you need in that moment and what you need going forward. But again, sometimes people don't know, Clodagh, and they need support to kind of help them have that clarity and focus, isn't it really? So yeah, I hope we will see a lot of you or loads of you on the 12th of April. And you can check it out through SharonFitzmauriceMindfulness.com, where you can book in through and you will be sent a Zoom link. Clodagh McComsky, I am just so grateful to you for this wonderful conversation today. We haven't even covered half of your work because there is so much in life that you have experienced and are experiencing now. But again, maybe that'll be for another conversation down the line for us on the podcast. But for anyone else that would like to contact Claude and find out more about the work that she is doing now, you can reach her on spiritualearth.com. And you're also with Nick Bailey running innerrhythm.ie, which is an online membership community program where you have different programs set out for different sessions. And I know Nick is doing the acoustic drumming in the back. Yes, so it's all beautiful, but please check it out because I'm not going to explain it properly. But you know what you are is a trailblazer. And I'm not sure if you've ever thought of yourself as that, but through everything that you have learned and experienced in your life, you've brought into your practice now as a speaker, as a trainer, working with different groups, organization, corporations, in your well-being practice. And everything that you've learned, I mean, you've worked from such high stress environments and you've brought that into where there's other high stress environments. It's the same thing, it's just a different location. Isn't it true?
It's so true. It's so true. There's so much of what I would have witnessed and experienced in those places. I see direct parallels in the modern workplace and just in society as a whole here. And the other thing is that there's so much that is known to solve the problems, right? Like both you and I have had that experience that you felt you could never solve them, right? And if there's you can,
Yeah,
right? Um,
absolutely.
and you need a pocket of safety, obviously, to start that journey. But it's possible. It's possible. So understand that. Understand that. There's a solution to every problem.
Absolutely. And sometimes, just like they did in those different countries that you worked on, it's sitting around the table and having people there to talk it out, support you, share ideas, share what we've learned along the way. And that's exactly what we're going to do on the 12th of April. And I'm so looking forward to. Clodagh, thank you so much.
Thank you, and I want to just thank you, and huge respect to you for all you do for other people. I was captivated by your talk, when you spoke, and I said that to you at the time. Um, you've got so much life experience, but you do so much good in the world, and you share your experience with a lot of kindness and a lot of grace, and I'm so honored and excited to be here today, to connect with your viewers, but also to work with you. So thank you.
Wow. Me too. As I said, synchronicity works and we connect with the people and places and experiences that we are going to learn from. And I have just loved this conversation as well. And I know my listeners will really enjoy it. But as I said, please go out and check out Clodagh's work on spiritualert.com or innerrhythm.ie for anything else. And I'm putting all the information up in the show notes so they can learn a bit more about you because I'd say you have many more stories to share, Clodagh, and hopefully we'll be able to sit down over a cup of tea sometime in person again and have a chat about them.
Looking forward to that. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Clodagh.
Bye bye, everyone. Yeah.
So thank you to everyone for listening, and until next time, take care of you.